Welcome to Global Watch. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In a stunning and historic decision, the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down the sweeping tariffs imposed during Donald Trump's second term, declaring them illegal and unconstitutional. This landmark ruling comes after months of heated legal battles and intense public debate, with the highest court in the land ultimately siding with those who argued that the executive branch had overstepped its authority. The decision marks a dramatic reversal of one of the most controversial economic policies in recent American history, and its implications are already being felt across the nation and around the world. This ruling dismantles a defining policy of recent American trade, sending shockwaves through Washington and global markets. Investors are scrambling to assess the fallout, as stock markets react with volatility and uncertainty. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are issuing urgent statements, while business leaders and economists warn of unpredictable consequences. The sudden removal of tariffs is forcing companies to rethink their supply chains and pricing strategies, and the ripple effects are being felt from Main Street to Wall Street. The court's decision is more than a legal technicality, it's a fundamental reevaluation of presidential power and a turning point for U.S. trade strategy. By ruling that the president cannot unilaterally impose such sweeping tariffs without congressional approval, the justices have set a powerful precedent that could reshape the balance of power in Washington for years to come. Legal scholars are already calling this a watershed moment for constitutional law and the separation of powers. International partners, especially China and the EU, are watching closely, as this could de-escalate trade tensions and reshape alliances. Foreign governments are reassessing their own trade policies in response, and diplomats are working behind the scenes to seize new opportunities for cooperation. The decision is being hailed by some as a chance to restore stability to global commerce, while others worry it could embolden rivals or complicate ongoing negotiations. The immediate fallout includes the potential for up to $1 trillion in tariff refunds, threatening chaos for the U.S. Treasury. Government officials are scrambling to develop a plan for handling the massive wave of refund claims from businesses and importers. Financial analysts warn that the sudden outflow of funds could disrupt federal budgets, impact public services, and even trigger a broader fiscal crisis if not managed carefully. Beyond the numbers, this is a story about the rule of law and America's role in the world. The Supreme Court's decision reaffirms the importance of checks and balances in the U.S. system of government, and sends a message to the world about the enduring strength of American democracy. It also raises important questions about how the U.S. will engage with its trading partners in the future, and what kind of leadership it will offer on the global stage. The economic and political aftershocks will be felt for years to come. As policymakers, businesses, and citizens grapple with the consequences of this unprecedented ruling, the nation stands at a crossroads, facing both uncertainty and the possibility of a new era in American trade and governance. Donald Trump branded himself as the Tariff Man, a title he wore with pride throughout his presidency. He made it clear from the campaign trail that he believed tariffs, essentially taxes on imported goods, were a powerful tool to reshape America's economic relationships with the world. Trump argued that for too long, other countries had taken advantage of the United States and it was time to fight back. Using import taxes as the centerpiece of his America First agenda, Trump aimed to revive domestic manufacturing and reduce the U.S. trade deficit. He promised that tariffs would bring jobs back to American soil and force trading partners to play by new rules. In his first term, he invoked old trade laws to levy tariffs on China and others, citing national security and unfair practices. The most high-profile of these battles was with China, sparking a trade war that rippled through global markets and affected everything from soybeans to smartphones. Upon returning to office, Trump escalated his approach, using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or EEPA, to bypass Congress and impose even broader tariffs. This move allowed him to act swiftly, without waiting for lawmakers, and dramatically expanded the president's authority over trade policy. Supporters saw this as tough action to protect American jobs. They cheered Trump's willingness to stand up to foreign competitors and praised his efforts to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. heartland. Many believed these policies would restore industries that had been hollowed out by decades of globalization. But critics called it an unconstitutional power grab and a tax on Americans. They argued that tariffs raised prices for consumers and businesses, and that bypassing Congress undermined the checks and balances at the heart of American democracy. The aggressive use of IEEPA alarmed both parties and business groups, who warned it set a dangerous precedent. Many feared that future presidents could use the same powers for even more sweeping actions, with little oversight or accountability. This fundamental clash over executive authority set the stage for a historic legal battle that reached the Supreme Court, where the limits of presidential power, and the future of American trade policy, would be put to the ultimate test. The legal fight began in February 2025, when former President Trump, seeking to fulfill campaign promises and address what he called unfair trade practices, declared a national emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA. This move was intended to justify a sweeping set of new tariffs on imports from China, Mexico, and Canada, America's largest trading partners. The announcement sent shockwaves through global markets, with economists and business leaders warning of potential retaliation and economic disruption. The administration argued that these tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and industries, but critics immediately questioned the legal basis for using emergency powers in this way. Just 2 months later, in April, Trump escalated the situation by declaring yet another emergency, this time citing the growing U.S. trade deficit. He imposed a blanket 10% tariff on nearly all imported goods, affecting everything from electronics to clothing and automobiles. The move was unprecedented in its scope, sparking confusion among importers and raising prices for American consumers almost overnight. Businesses, industry groups, and even some lawmakers quickly banded together to challenge the tariffs in court. They argued that the president had overstepped his constitutional authority, and that only Congress has the power to regulate tariffs and international trade. Lawsuits were filed in multiple federal courts, setting the stage for a high-stakes legal battle. In August, a federal appeals court delivered a major blow to the administration, ruling that IEEPA does not grant the president the authority to impose tariffs for economic reasons. The court emphasized that the Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to set tariffs, and that emergency powers cannot be used to bypass this fundamental principle. With billions of dollars in the future of U.S. trade policy at stake, the case raced to the Supreme Court. Recognizing the enormous economic consequences, the justices agreed to fast-track oral arguments, drawing national attention and intense debate over the limits of presidential power. Treasury officials and economic advisors warned that overturning the tariffs could unleash chaos in the markets, with the government potentially facing massive refund liabilities to importers. The uncertainty rattled Wall Street and Main Street alike, as businesses scrambled to adjust to the rapidly changing legal landscape. As the Supreme Court prepared to hear arguments, the nation braced for a historic showdown, one that would not only determine the fate of the tariffs, but also redefine the boundaries of presidential authority and the future of American economic policy. On October 8, 2025, the Supreme Court ruled that Trump's IEPA-based tariffs were unconstitutional, reaffirming that only Congress can impose taxes and duties. The decision immediately invalidated the fentanyl and blanket 10% tariffs, obligating the government to refund hundreds of billions, possibly up to $1 trillion, to importers. The ruling does not affect earlier tariffs imposed under other trade laws, but it opens the door to new legal challenges. For businesses, the decision means instant relief from these tariffs, but it also signals a dramatic curtailment of presidential power in trade. The U.S. average tariff rate will drop sharply, and future administrations will need explicit congressional approval for such sweeping actions. The ruling fundamentally reshapes the landscape of U.S. trade policy and executive authority. For businesses, the end of IEPA tariffs brings immediate financial relief, but the refund process is expected to be slow and complex. Many companies had already passed tariff costs to consumers, so price drops at the checkout will be delayed, possibly by a year or more. The sudden policy reversal forces businesses to rethink supply chains and investment plans yet again. The scale of refunds could have unpredictable macroeconomic effects, adding to the uncertainty. While the removal of tariffs should help ease inflation and boost efficiency in the long run, the transition will be rocky. Industries once protected by tariffs now face renewed foreign competition. The Supreme Court has provided legal clarity, but the economic turbulence is just beginning. The Supreme Court's decision is a major blow to Trump's legacy, undermining his America First trade strategy and fueling political debate about presidential overreach. The ruling reasserts congressional authority over trade and sets a precedent that future presidents must respect constitutional limits, even in emergencies. Internationally, the decision is likely to ease tensions with key trading partners and could help repair strained alliances. However, it may also embolden other countries to challenge U.S. trade actions, knowing the president's powers are now more limited. The U.S. loses some leverage in negotiations but gains credibility as a rules-based trading partner. The verdict is both an opportunity for diplomatic reset and a challenge for maintaining American influence abroad. Trade law experts predict a flood of litigation as businesses rush to claim refunds, potentially clogging courts for years. Economists warn of short-term confusion and pain, even as the long-term outlook brightens. The Trump team may seek alternative legal tools for tariffs, but none are as sweeping as IEEPA. The refund process injects massive uncertainty into the economy, with unpredictable effects on investment, hiring, and inflation. The ruling swaps one kind of uncertainty, tariff policy, for another, its aftermath. While the decision is a win for the rule of law, it leaves the nation facing a complex legal and economic maze. The next chapter in American trade policy will be defined by how the country manages this transition. The Supreme Court's ruling has created a bureaucratic nightmare for the U.S. government, which must now process millions of refund claims from importers. Customs and Border Protection is unprepared for this reversal, and the documentation required will be daunting for both large and small businesses. Many smaller firms may struggle to reclaim what they're owed, leaving billions unclaimed. The Treasury faces a fiscal crisis as refunding up to $1 trillion was never budgeted for, and could impact national debt and government operations. The process could take years with delays, disputes, and legal challenges along the way. For businesses, the uncertainty around refunds complicates financial planning. The administrative chaos threatens to undermine the very relief the ruling was meant to provide. The Supreme Court's decision closes a turbulent chapter in U.S. trade, but opens a new era of both risk and opportunity. Congress must now reclaim its constitutional role and craft a smarter, more predictable trade policy. The trillion-dollar refund process and global supply chain realignment demands steady leadership, not partisan squabbling. For Americans, the outcome will shape prices, jobs, and international relationships for years to come. The world is watching to see if the U.S. can rebuild trust and lead in forging a fairer, more stable global economy. The challenge is immense, but so is the opportunity. The next steps will define America's economic future and its place in the world.